Too late. Already clicked the button.
Uh,
And that's how we're starting the episode. Oh, for those of you just getting started, actually, you are just getting started because I just clicked on the record button. But hey, welcome. Thanks for joining the podcast. Warren, how are you?
I'm great. I feel like, we should go back to this is Adventures in DevOps, for the first time listeners. If this is just the one episode they happen to click on, then they're in for a real treat today because I'm really interested in today's topic.
Yeah, and today's topic, we have Gorkem Ercan with us, and we're going to be talking about how to integrate AI and ML into teams using tooling that's a little bit more aligned with how we do DevOps. Does that sound about right, Gorkem?
yeah, that sounds right.
All
Yep.
right, cool. Before we dig into the details of that, can you share with our listeners a little bit about your background?
Sure. I am the CTO of Jozu. The Jozu is a company that is trying to make it easier for enterprises to adopt AI and ML into their applications. And prior to Jozu, I was with Red Hat for many, many years. I was a distinguished engineer with Red Hat, worked on developer tools, which in Red Hat, it covers anything from IDEs to CI/CD pipelines to DevOps. So it's all everything that you can think of that is open source and developer tool. My group kind of got involved with those. As part of that, I did Java tools early in my career for something called J2EE, if anyone remembers that. So, and then I actually had the great idea of integrating Java tooling into VS Code. The current Java tooling is something that I have done in a month or so, and that has grown to what it is today. My group got involved with things like Tecton, CD Foundation, and so on and so forth. So I've been doing DevOps for the last probably 5 years, or tools for DevOps for the 5 years, and tools in general before that. Before joining Red Hat, I was working for Nokia, the phone company. So I was in the middle of the mobile revolution.
Right on.
So, again, mostly doing open source projects at Nokia at the time.
When you say
Uh,
open source and Java and Red Hat, my mind immediately goes to Jenkins, and I don't have a particular soft spot in my heart for that product, but I can imagine you've had to spend a lot of time with it. Is that what they were using?
So yeah, we did start with Jenkins. We did support, or Red Hat still supports Jenkins to some degree. But at the time when we tried to do a project called OpenShift.io, and one of the things that we tried to do at the time was to run Jenkins in a manner that it is not supposed to be run. At the time, I think Jenkins is doing better now, but at the time, Jenkins was created as a server, so it was meant to run as a server. But then when you're on the cloud trying to run Jenkins, one thing that you want to do is you want to try to run it serverless. Like if I need to go and build something, especially if you are doing this as a SaaS service, you want to just on demand start a Jenkins instance, do your builds, and then shut it down so that you're not spending too much on the cloud resources. That didn't work well for us. So one of the things that happened at the time was the Knative project, if you're familiar with it. And as part of the Knative project, the first code drop, before it even got public, it was open to some of the Red Hatters, including myself. And one of the things that we noticed was there was a build piece in the Knative code, which was actually doing serverless builds, essentially. So the whole idea of, can we actually make this and turn this into something? It turned out to be the Tekton project later, and then it became the Tekton's CI/CD system that we know today. So we got involved with that because of Jenkins, because we couldn't actually make it cloud native at the time. So it felt like, we should actually, do something cloud native instead. That's our involvement with Jenkins. But on the other hand, I would still bet that a big chunk of workloads on Kubernetes in the world is actually Jenkins.
That would be a great survey to execute.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have numbers. That would be my guess. It's in double digits. I'm pretty sure about that.
I feel like this is where ignorance is bliss. Like I'm going to pretend that's not happening and just continue living my life in whatever delusion I have currently going on.
No, unfortunately, it is true. It's there. It's in many enterprises. You can't ignore Jenkins. It's hundreds of instances.
For sure. Yeah. I have a love-hate relationship with Jenkins. I hate working with it, but I love how it can just do absolutely anything you need it to do.
And the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Like the ecosystem behind Jenkins. I think nowadays GitHub Actions maybe at that level, but the ecosystem behind Jenkins, it's pretty big. It's very important. You can find a plugin for anything, essentially, or anything that you care about.
Right, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about AI ML, since that's our topic for today. And there's whenever I think about this, the most common scenarios that I see coming up are people using ChatGPT or tools like that, and it seems like a very early stage product. So to get that enterprise ready, what are the challenges that people are facing?
Yeah, so I think ChatGPT, what we are going through right now is that in every enterprise there's one or two, let's call it experiments that is going on. And usually when you're starting the experiment, the first thing that you do is what is the least resistance that you can face? And that is use the ChatGPT APIs, right? The Open API, or Microsoft has Azure APIs as well. So use those and do whatever you need to do and come up with your first early experiments. And when you look at those experiments in many of the organizations, what you see is there are a lot of success that is coming in. There's a lot of learning that they are going through, but there is also successful stories as well coming out of them. The one thing about AI is indeterministic, right? It's like the first time that you do something with AI, you're going to fail. And then the second, you're going to do another iteration and you're going to understand that behavior, and then you're going to do another iteration. I think ChatGPT and all the other APIs out there, the Open API and similar AI APIs out there, I think it provides them this opportunity to do the experimentation. But the way I see it is this is temporary, right? This is just dipping your toes into the water. When you actually want to start doing something that will change your business and try to get some financial benefits to your company, that means integrating with many, many systems. That means it's like we have seen it with cloud, we have seen it with mobile, right? It's not a oh, here's one application that is mobile, or here is one application that runs on the cloud. You're starting to adopt it to your organization. Or if you're even older, there was a time where we talked about paperless office, right? So it's like it takes a little bit of time. It's a process, and you actually need to internalize it into your organization. I think the next step for many of these organizations is to start to internalize it. And when you're internalizing it, you cannot really depend on a third party service. And some of the industries cannot even share their data, give their data to these services where there is concerns for privacy and security and so on and so forth. So they need to start running these essentially base models internally in their infrastructure or in their cloud infrastructure so that they can get the benefits. And the one thing that I see is when you go to your data scientist or data scientist or ML engineer, they are separate from the DevOps engineers in the company. They are not well integrated. They have a very different tool set. It's just because of the way the AI has been developed and coming into the world. And one thing that you notice is there is no shortage of open source projects and tools in the AI world, but there is a shortage of projects and open source tools in the AI world that are standards. You can just think of any subject and you can find 10 alternates to do it. None of them talks to each other. Right. Nothing is standard. So this is one of the things that we have noticed. We actually were trying to solve this for ourselves as well. And one of the things we decided was, okay, so I have so many ways of storing a model and moving that to production. I have so many ways of storing a data set and moving that to inference or the training and testing and so on and so forth. But none of it is standard. Like, this should be easier than what it is right now. So what we did is we came up with an open source project called kitapps.ml. And what kitapps.ml provides is what we call model kits. A model kit is essentially an OCI artifact. And an OCI artifact, like a container image. It's not a container image itself, but it's an OCI artifact. The advantage of being an OCI artifact is it can be stored in any OCI registry, like Docker Hub, ECR, Azure, wherever your image registry is. And using the information that is stored in the model kit, you can actually move your models as part of your CI/CD pipelines, much efficient, because your CI/CD pipelines actually usually knows how to talk to OCI registries. For instance, when today we have a registry that we are running ourselves in Jojo.ml, and you will see many signed model kits in there. The tool that we are using to sign model kits is cosign, which is what you would use for signing an imagery and a regular container image. So the idea behind having the OCI artifacts was to introduce a standard way of storing and standard way of sharing your AI artifacts between data scientists and ML engineers and DevOps engineers.
You said something really interesting in there, and I haven't heard it put it this way before, that your first foray into using any sort of AI or ML models in your company will be an experiment that ends in failure. And I think there's something really to that, because I can imagine if you like walked around and put like a hammer on every engineer's desk and said, you will now start to develop with this hammer instead of what you were using before. I feel like it's a ridiculous analogy, but I think there's a lot of sense there that like that for sure will not end in success there. Like however you thought you could utilize it internally is probably not going to be super effective. And that obviously extends into the area of if you are building AI into your product, not just using it as a tool for development. And you're really talking about this next level, which isn't just using it, but actually creating it to be effective as part of the product offering.
Yeah. And the reason for that is it's very indeterministic, right? With the AI itself. So you may actually think that like when we are integrating applications together, the rule-based applications, the outcome is very deterministic. We know that these are the inputs and these will be the outputs. In the case of AI, that's not the case, right? So when you go through your first initial cycle and go through you receive your inputs and then you start to get your outputs, you start to see these outputs that you haven't expected before. And usually, like for instance, it's very likely that you're missing actually some data that you're feeding into the model, and you're not getting the outputs that you're expecting, because let's say that you're giving the customers 10 data, but then when you give the 11th data, the AI is now able to make the connection or make the analysis better and give a better result. So you will start to notice things like that. And it is not very easy to notice this at the design phase. It's not even possible to notice these things at the design phase. So that's why I'm saying that your first experiment is going to fail, and you're going to do another one with more data or less data or changed data, and then you will get to a state where you're happy with the outputs.
I have a fear here now that like, if I'm incorporating it into one of our products, we have a couple, and we have tried going down the route of adding some AI into one of them. There is this, so when we say non-deterministic, we mean like literally the same inputs gives us different output.
Yeah,
and
exactly that is.
I wonder if we're training our customers to believe that they should just, turn it off and turn it on again, in a sense, right? Like, you have to keep repeating the same question over and over again to get the answer you want. And that feels like a dangerous thing to push that expectation onto the users of our products.
Yeah, there is I see what you're saying. And I think that's the part of the AI that still needs to be enhanced a little bit. The whole subject of guardrails on AI is a little bit. It feels early. Let me put
I'm totally with you. No, there was actually a study that was released just recently, and I think Will can appreciate this, that it's not being, like prompt engineering isn't being used for malicious purposes. It's generally being used by power users to actually get value out of the system more than anything, which I think is really surprising that these systems aren't being abused in that way realistically yet. And so adding in guardrails, if anything, is just preventing those early adopters from being able to utilize your product more effectively rather than preventing malicious attackers.
Right. And we actually, like, since you said prompt engineering, we actually talked with an enterprise recently, and one of their needs was to share their prompts. Like, think of it this way: you have a database of all your enterprise's data, all your customer data, and so on and so forth. In the past, the SQL statements that you have used for finance was very different from the SQL statements that you have used for sales. So you never really actually cared to share the SQL statements. But now what they are seeing is, as you said, there are these power users who are using these prompts and getting really good results out of those prompts that are querying their, or that are connected to their data, right? So what they want to be able to do is to be able to share these prompts, like between finance and HR and sales and so on and so forth, so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. But I think that we're starting to see a different picture now in the AI world with these kind of things. But when you are opening your data through an AI model directly to your customers, I think there's still work that needs to be done on the guardrails. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. It reminds me a lot of there's two things here that seem like there's lessons we can learn here from other engineering or other industries. Like whenever I work with early stage startups, I always say that like the goal of your first product as a startup is to launch let me rephrase that. To become a successful startup, you have to identify the difference between the product that you built and the product that your customers thought you built, and close that gap. And it feels like this is very similar to that, because AI will answer whatever question you ask it, and then you have to figure out what assumptions it made that you didn't want it to make. And that's where I think really sharing those prompt models can be helpful. For a while there on X, there was a trend where people were, sharing what they were doing with different AI models, and then also sharing the prompts that they use too. And I found that really interesting to see the different caveats that they would give in the prompt to keep it from wandering off some other path that gave you an answer that looked right, but wasn't actually the answer that you needed.
No, you say that, and it's like actually really ridiculous. Like I'm going through right now, I'm making a presentation for the European AWS reInvent that I'm speaking at, and I want some pictures, and I will ask. I'm using one of the tools, and I will ask the same question multiple times. But when I get a picture that I actually like, I will take the prompt that I used for it, and I will save it as the file name of the picture, so that I can get it's ridiculous, but that's the name for me. That really is the thing that identifies it, so that I can potentially go back later and be like, what did I use to actually generate that image?
So let me complicate that problem a little bit. So you're using a ChatGPT, for instance, like a tool, right?
It's not the one from OpenAI, but yeah, for sure, it's
right. You're using essentially a ChatGPT, a service. So you don't really know the version number. Really, you don't really know the data sets that it has been used and retrained and so on and so forth. So for some of the organizations, that's not going to work. Yeah. So some organizations are going to say, hey, you know what? I need to know exactly the model, the data set that it was trained on, and I need to know where my fine-tuning is coming from, where my RAGs is coming from. So I need all the lineage of this when this prompt was issued. And right. So you need systems that are capable of telling precisely what was the data set, what is the model, what is the fine-tuning data set, right? And what is, if you have been using RAG, what is the version of the vector database or the lineage of the vectors. All of this stored and available somewhere, because something may happen at any point saying that, oh, you need to go back and figure out what went wrong with this answer. What went wrong with this. Today, like if you're using an API, you can't really say what went wrong. And So if you think about it this way, we actually have a system that was used for this purpose. We used SBOMs to be able to say exactly what we have used in production for our applications, right? So can we actually utilize the same system with AI as well? Like, oh, I'm using the application XYZ. It's built out of these dependencies, these libraries, and so on and so forth. An AI application is not too different. It's basically saying that, oh, I'm using the same application, the same dependencies. I'm using the inference engine X, Y, Z, and then I'm using the model weights that are coming from here. I'm using a data set that was used that is coming from here. And these are all in an SBOM, which existing systems know how to parse and get results from. And we know how to sign SBOMs. We know how to store SBOMs in OCI artifacts. So I think that's kind of, is the missing link nowadays, where we are doing these things in our enterprises, adopting base models from somewhere, and none of the data sets that we are using is enough. So one of our engineers just goes to Google and searches for a data set and uses that to, do some of the training. You don't know what is in that data set. So it's a little bit Wild West at the moment with the AI adoption. So, and when it was Wild West for the regular applications, we ended up with things like we ended up with things like what was the log4j, right? So how many days any Java developer spent trying to figure out if they have used the wrong version of log4j when that came out, right? So things happen, and I think we need to be prepared for it. And it's a little bit wild west at the moment with the AI ML.
If as we talk about this more, it kind of feels like there is it's almost like a communication problem. One of the things you said, Gorkem, was knowing the lineage of the data. And when it comes to these AI models, we have a very human feeling interface to it. And so I think we naturally try to leverage that. But the difference being, if I ask either of you who was the last president, you probably are going to assume that I'm talking about current time. But if I'm talking to a data set and that data set is 20 years old and I ask it who the last president is, I'm going to get the wrong answer. And I feel like it's those hidden assumptions that we have when we communicate that make us have to be overly verbose with these tools.
See, I don't think AI is special here. I think that our own culture and values propagate much too far into it, and as well as our neural diversity. Like I'm on some spectrum somewhere, and when you say who is the last president, I what I heard was like the last president there will ever be, like as if you're talking about some history, and
don't threaten me with a good time.
And today's I look at today's like political climate, that is I'm evaluating that based off of the model that I've trained in myself. And I can also imagine like for other cultures out there, depending on who you're talking to, I feel like in the West or in the United States, it may be much more clear, but depending on who you're talking to and where they come from, they're going to have much different answers on that. And I feel like we may be more closely able to understand what some of those implicit inputs into that human model there are based off of what we know about them or the current world. And I think we definitely do throw a lot of that out the window when we are utilizing a prompt sitting on a website somewhere.
For sure. So what are the big challenges that that we're facing with this from a DevOps perspective? Like, how do we set the framework and the guardrails to get that tool from the AI developers into a production grade capacity?
So I guess the first one is, how do you package this? How do you set this over in a manner? And, we have one solution with GitOps for it. The second challenge that we have noticed and started working on is AI is more non-deterministic and it's more complex. So when you think about a workflow that you use on DevOps, it's more linear. And there is a starting point, and there's an endpoint, and there's an artifact that you can record and send to production, and so on and so forth. With AI, it works a little bit different because you send to production, but you after that you keep on watching, and because it drifts, the data changes, the model, 20 years passes, the president changes. And so on and so forth. So you start to notice these drifts, and you need to start to constantly observe the models and then react to their changes. And not just the models itself as well. Before, the training needs to be even if you're doing fine tuning, whether your fine tuned model is adequate or not, that's actually a bunch of tests that needs to be run and then compared and so on and so forth. So the one thing that we have noticed is this is almost like there's a lot of signals that are coming in from these DevOps systems that we're going to use for training, inference, production, and observability of the AI. But there isn't a real solution out there that reacts to it, that brings everything together so that you can use these things together in a more orderly fashion, or easier, integrate them easier to be to cite it in a different way. So what we, I don't know if this is the right language to use, but what we said was, let's build a control plane for this so that it receives all these signals for all your AI ML applications, including everything that is coming in from observability, from your CI/CD pipelines, your training pipelines, your data set changes, your data extractions, and so on and so forth. And in the control plane, we define what needs to be, and then the control plane reacts to these signals and runs the data plane components like your CI/CD and so on and so forth, or your deployments in such a way that the system tries to get back to the state that you want it to be. So we started working on a control plane for AI and ML applications, so that some of the challenges of running and integrating AI and ML into an enterprise is boxed into a control plane, essentially.
Maybe this is a controversial statement to make. I get the sense that our current capabilities for generating new models restricts those models in a way which makes them not very good at reasoning or analysis. And if they're not good in that, then what we're left with is pretty much data replay, construction, content creation. But we know that the models that we're creating, they're not good at that because they suffer from hallucinations, from making up stuff by combining different pieces. I think I read somewhere that the summarization strategy that a lot of models have taken in their creation is to look at the headlines of articles that have been written and then consume the content of the article and index that, and then do a reverse index lookup. So, hey, here's my article. What summarizes for me? It will spit back out the title. And if we look at the content that humans have created so far, titles are all clickbaity, have nothing to do with the conclusion. And so even if they were right, they're still not very accurate. And so like I'm wondering if we are not still a bit too early in trying to automate or improve some of these things when the base thing we're getting out still is fundamentally limited in capability.
I don't think so. I think I need to be very careful about this because I don't want to add to the hype.
Yeah.
Because I think the AI is overhyped at the moment.
No, no, definitely not. What?
Well, yep. I know. It's a shock to me too. So it is a little bit hyped, let's call it. But on the other hand, I don't think with the capabilities, and we when we talk about the hype of the AI, we are usually talking about the Gen AI, right? The LLMs and generative AI. But in reality, there is also other kinds of AI and ML as well. So that we don't usually talk about, but it's actually getting a lot of benefits from this hype, essentially. So when I think about it, that whole space as one piece of technology area, I think this is not early. Like we can start adopting AI and ML projects into our enterprises, even with generative AI, which was what you were referring to. Essentially, you can get really good results out of it. Like there was one article. I think it wasn't even an article. It was Walmart reporting their quarterly results. They basically said, we're more efficient with our online business because of generative AI. I think they were generating product descriptions more efficiently or something. So they actually started doing better financially. So there are pockets of even direct financial benefit that we are starting to see from generative AI and from AI, ML, and other kinds of AI. There has always been in the last 5 years, there has always been projects that were bringing benefits to the business. What is changing with the hype is now there is more eyeballs looking into this area, so that there is an accelerated opportunity for adoption. In the past, you had a chance to get one base model for something, for categorizations, let's say, but now you have 10. And you can actually test the 10 categorization base models and then get a better fit for your data. So there are things like that is actually happening that's going to, I think, help the enterprises and the businesses get more value out of AI and ML. So I guess generative AI is a little bit too much hyped up, but that is not a bad thing for the rest of the AI world.
I mean, you say that, and now you got me thinking, and maybe a more philosophical perspective. If we're just lacking a number of people paying more attention and investing their resources in actually researching or building up the technology more, are the limitations that we're facing something fundamentally within the capability of human society to overcome, or is reaching general artificial intelligence actually a completely made up dream?
Yeah.
And for the record, this is not I expect anyone to have an accurate answer to this question.
I don't have an accurate answer. Of course, I don't think anyone has, or they may have an interpretation for or expectation for it. But to be honest, the amount of compute that we have been using to train models, even the small ones, is enormous. For us to get to a place where we have more capable models, I think it will take some kind of a leap before something needs to happen. This amount of compute that we need for that is just enormous at the moment. And the other thing that I'm actually worried about is, without actually getting adoption and value, how much can we continue to spend on training more and more capable AI models? At some point.
I don't know if it's actually a monetary problem. I understand that we're actually resource constrained, and I'm wondering if those chips are coming from Taiwan, of which has its own sort of issues, and we don't have another opportunity to actually produce what is necessary in order to accelerate further. It's like a fundamental limitation of, we're limited not by our ability or by the technology's ability, but realistically our actual capability of a resource
to produce fast enough. Yeah. Oh, and also not to forget the data, because the way that the AI is being trained today, we throw in a large amounts of data to it, and we threw pretty much everything that we can so far. So
it's that's its own sort of problem, because the internet is sort of over as far as what it used to be, a free public sharing of knowledge. That's no longer the thing, and so we're only going to be accessible to a smaller pool of information going forward for future models. That data now has finally have a price on it, and realistically, as you point out, it's not that much, and it's not even that good if this is the best we can come out with it at this point. So it does seem like we're at some sort of obstacle to get further, both from a data creation standpoint and a resource creation standpoint.
Right, but to be honest, like the general AI is a it's a very good ambition to have, but most enterprises and businesses do not need it. What we have today with their data is plenty enough for them to actually get financial benefits and efficiencies and value out of AI and ML. I think there are two facets to this. There is there's these ambitions which we should actually try to pursue, but then there is, can we actually start adopting the technology that we have generated over these years, so that we start creating value to our businesses and communities, right? So I don't think the two are connected, as connected as we think. It's like we don't need to wait the first to do the second.
Yeah, for sure. Where is AI adoption on the will technology adoption scale?
Not really a priority for me. I think just because of the industry that I'm in, for me, the most value that it has is like a personal value of using it to remember the things that I've forgotten. How do I do an async await in JavaScript or things like that. From a business perspective, I don't personally have any use cases that I'm actively involved with, though I think it has a lot of power and potential. It's not that I've ruled it out. It's just that it's not a priority for me right at the moment.
No, I totally get it, right? Like it always optimizes for like the norm, right? And so as long as the norm is better than where you are, it's a good thing to use it, because you'll get to that norm. But Will, you're such a great engineer that what it's going to suggest to you is going to be worse than what you would create by default.
Which comes back into, I think that comes back into the prompt engineering topic that we were having. To get useful information out of it, I have to give it all of the internal mental models that I would use to get a similar or better answer.
And that's really where all the effort goes into. Like, how do I
Yeah.
even correctly? It's like I have an intuition about how to think about this. Now I need to convey that intuition to another being using natural language of which I've never thought about how I'm even thinking about this problem before. I totally agree. That's where all of the challenge really comes in to get valuable output from these models.
So it's one of the things that I have noticed, and I'm sure that there is a scientific explanation to it, which I haven't really looked up. But when you actually give a working example of what you're trying to achieve to the model,
Yeah.
you usually get much better results from the model. Like if you teach it, this is how it should work once,
Yeah.
then the rest it goes much easier for you.
I mean, and we know that must be true because like in the LLMs are designed by humans, and humans operate in this like 6 levels of thinking hierarchy, where like
Yeah.
the bottom level is like rote repetition, and that means you saw the answer in some format before, and you can repeat it again. And I feel like that's the first level. If you want an answer that looks like something, you like even another human, right? I need to show you what success looks like before I expect you to output it, especially inexperienced engineers. But then there's like 5 more levels of this where I know for sure that it's not going to get to without also deep conscious thinking and deliberate input on those levels in order, like, don't just do one. I need, like, if I'm going to ask it to create unit tests for me. I love this example because I actually think this is something that really works well, especially going from one language to another one. The steps are, and we were just doing this in Authorus as we were converting some of our code from JavaScript to Rust. We say, okay, we have this code in JavaScript, these tests in JavaScript. Write tests that look like this in Rust, then write the actual code, and then run the Rust unit test against the code so we have this sort of validation. And the first level is really the unit test, but we then need to say things like, oh, but also make sure to handle these weird edge cases and like specifically list out some edge cases. So someone has to think about those. And then there's like, okay, now I need to generate like ways in which this could fail, which is like another level on top of that. And, propose different ways in which we could re-architect this whole aspect. And I can't just say that, right? I can't just say, oh yeah, refactor this code for me in an optimal way. I need to actually, like, how do I know what to refactor? How do I know what to do that? It's just such a challenge to articulate even from one person to another one. And I almost want to like draw a diagram. Well, how do I feed that in though? Like there has a different LLM.
Some models allows you to do.
Right, exactly. Which does create this whole other challenge in order to really get the value out to a high enough level that we really wanted to have.
Yeah, and I mean it's something that we have recently done with. It's language in, language out, right? LLMs are really good at those. It's like we have done a similar thing. We actually had to implement a piece of code that was implemented in Rust, but we had to run it in a different environment, which didn't allow us to run Rust at the time. So we said, okay, here's some Rust code that implements this algorithm and this thing, and then just can you convert that to, I think, TypeScript at that time. It did. And it runs as good as it does. Like it converts all the unit tests and as you said, and it works perfectly, except that you don't get the performance. Like there is no way that you can get the performance, and all of a sudden you're faced with the fact that, oh, okay, this code is maybe equivalent but not equal. So there is also that fact as well. But the good thing about it was we actually spent only 45 minutes to just get that code converted and learn that, this will never perform the same, so that we had to go a different way. So I don't know how much time we saved by just doing that, but that was worth it. So it's not always about actually getting the result that you want. it's also sometimes about getting the wrong result quicker as well.
Oh, true story. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean,
Go ahead, Will.
I was just going to reinforce that because a lot of times that's the best learning that you can get. You know, if you get the right answer the first time, you don't learn as much as you do when you think you were going to get the right answer and get something completely opposite. You know, like it's like when tackling a new project or a new problem, one of the most important things to learn is what questions should I be asking that I don't know I should be asking, and getting the wrong answer helps you along that path.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge challenge there when you almost know from intuition that the response is wrong. I mean, it's wrong. Obviously, it came from an LLM, but I mean, it's like there's something special about it that you just know you're like, oh, that can't really be the best way to do this. And you're like, do it differently. And like I'm running out of words to basically say, try again, but don't use any of those constructs you used this time. And it's just every time it's just subtly wrong in a different way. And so there is certainly a learning there of, all of these ways in which not to do it. I would just, one day I would like it to actually give me a right answer.
Yeah, it's the LLMs are sneaky. So they're going to give you an answer that is 99% correct. But then that 1%, they are going to hide a bug that you're going to spend the next 2 days trying to find in production.
Yeah, I mean, you're lucky if it happens. You're definitely lucky if it's short-term turnaround like that, right? Where, it happens quickly and not like, months or years down the road when you may not even be part of the team anymore. And now you've got that, which is where a lot of the, bugs come up there. I'm interested, though, if we flash back to something you were talking about before, about where some of the real value is when we were talking about Walmart and the content automatic creation descriptions for the products that they're having. I wonder how many of those are out there, because I mean, I think a lot of the hype right now is focused on this, I'm going to say lie, that it increases the productivity of software engineers. A lot of companies are repeating this. I'm waiting for some actual real data on it. But I'm really curious about the ways in which the enterprises, the larger companies, are finding opportunities that aren't just like a chatbot on a website.
Right. I mean, I think that's table stakes at this point. The software engineering is like, yeah, are there benefits to it? Are there no benefits to it? It's controversial. But then there are other uses, like for instance, when one of the usages that I have seen is the company they're running a support service, a phone support service.
Yeah.
And what they were doing was doing sentiment analysis.
Okay.
Of the calls.
Yeah.
So that they can do better callbacks to customers whose sentiment was not as good as they want it to be. So I think that's one way of doing customer satisfaction and keeping your brand recognition and so on and so forth. So it's like, and one of the things that they actually had was they first tried it, the sentiment analysis, but they had to actually feed additional data to the model to get the sentiment analysis correct.
Yeah.
It's one of those examples where you have, you may not get it right on the first run, but then you need to like adjust for it and then try again. I wish I could give their name. That's a very exciting name. So, but what they did was really, they were really happy with it. They were to the point they were always doing callbacks to the customers.
Yeah.
But the selection process was not something that they were able to streamline to the level that that they get more and more better results out of it. Now they were now they're able to target the right customers because they are able to do the sentiment analysis out of those calls.
Sentiment analysis is an interesting one. We actually have a product, it's like the number one stand-up bot in Slack, and we tried to run some AI models on our responses for stand-ups, and like it was very clear whether it was like a 1 or a 5 on a 5-point scale. But like, you know, you get in, and those are obvious, but the ones in the middle were quite the challenging spot there, and we ended up discarding the notion entirely because it is the sort of thing that I feel like you really want to get right and not be in the danger area. But your example made me think of something that I had read recently, actually, where a call center realized that the psychological safety of their staff actually being super important for the success of the organization was being threatened by irate callers that would call up and yell and scream maybe obscenities at them, because, you know, obviously support calls are being made by people who are usually not happy. I mean, maybe that's a controversial statement, but I believe that's true. You know, generally speaking, you're calling up the support line because you're not thrilled with the service you're getting. And it was challenging for them. And what I heard that they were doing was actually using AI to alter the vocal expression of the calls they were getting so that they seemed more demure in content. Like they weren't screaming, they weren't swearing, they weren't high volume pitches, automatically changing what the staff were hearing so that they wouldn't be susceptible or subjugated to an environment that would be worse for them and the company.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very innovative way of using it, essentially. Right. It's, it's always hard when you're on the first line with customer who is not happy.
Yeah.
So it helps. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
And then there's the people where the more swear words they have is actually an indicator that they are happy.
Projecting a bit there, Will.
Yeah,
I guess.
Right? I mean, we may be able to identify someone who fits in that category. Sort of tangential to this, that's one of the things I did in using Chat GPT is I told it, I don't know if y'all are familiar with who David Goggins is, but he's a very vocal and blunt person. I think we can just say that. But I told Chat GPT that it could adopt that person's speaking style and personality. And like instantly, I was more productive with it because I could drop F-bombs and it would respond with, hell yeah, let's go. And like all of a sudden I was communicating with someone who spoke the way that I did.
So I just assumed, and this is obviously not really knowing your history, that if you've seen Full Metal Jacket and Drill Sergeant, like I just assume that this is the life you've gone through, Will, in your past being in the Navy. That, you know, there is something just for you special about being yelled at in this way, which really gets you into gear.
Right? Screaming F-bombs is my love language.
Okay. We're doing this podcast completely wrong.
Right.
I mean, I guess we can release 2 versions of the stream, you know, the natural one and the one that's attenuated using AI that strips out all of the obscenities that are coming out of Will's mouth. So if you're not hearing
Will
him,
special.
yeah, I mean, if you're not hearing Will swear every other word, that's what's actually happening right now.
The Will special.
Right? There's so many ways that could go wrong.
Yeah. But yeah, there's always that. I tried to do the same with ChatGPT back in the day as well. That didn't go well for me.
So one thing I'm curious about, like, are there common use cases you're seeing from specific types of customers, like enough where you could say like this industry or this segment is betting really heavily on AI and ML, and they're actually making progress?
That's a good question.
Um, Finance definitely is there. Insurance companies, both on the customer support side and also on the risk analysis and so on and so forth. Essentially, the risk analysis they have been doing for many years. But as I said, the hype, the result of the hype is they are now able to adopt things that are more advanced, easier, and in some cases cheaper than they were able to do in the past. So those are the two that we are seeing. The one thing that I was surprised about is the consulting companies was. Because we're providing a tool, perhaps that's why as well, we get a lot of interest from consulting companies, which are essentially, some of them are actually building DevOps pipelines for other companies that are very interested in adopting our tools. So that was, that's something that I wasn't expecting, unexpected for me. So I do not really know what kind of industries these consultant companies are working for, and some of them are really large. So I don't know if you can tell.
No, I mean, you say consulting, and two things came to mind, like management consulting, of which we knew all along that what the words coming out of their mouth could easily be puppeted by an LLM, and maybe third-party contractors who are you're hiring to outsource some work. I could imagine they're trying to sneakily basically use LLMs instead of even cheaper, because supposedly it's even more cheaper labor than even outsourcing to deliver the work items.
No, in this case, no, it was no. In this case, they are actually hired as experts for building a pipeline for instance, one of the cases that we're helping with is they're building a pipeline for consuming base models and retraining them or fine-tuning them. I see. So it's not that kind of work. It's not like adapting the LLM for doing something. It's more about taking base models, making sure the lineage is there, SBOMs are there, and so on and so forth. What it essentially is they are building CI/CD pipelines, very complex CI/CD pipelines for these companies. And as far as I understand, they are working on multiple projects at the same time. So there is a lot of consultancy activity that I'm sure that there is more. It's just we are seeing a few of the examples who are adapting our tools, but there's a lot of that going on. So that only tells me that it's like there is a bit of activity happening in industries that are known to use consultancy. So, and to be honest, I am impressed on the fact that they are actually doing the right thing. It's like you don't, at this point of the hype, you don't usually get the people doing the right thing and building, building provenance attestations, SBOMs, and so on and so forth. So when you see that, you're like, I'm impressed.
No, I totally get it. I mean, different field, but we offer login and access control as a SaaS product, and we're talking with our customers, and they say to them things like, "Well, because of these reasons, we decided to go with your product," and it makes me feel like really happy that at least there are some people out there that are thinking through this effectively. Like whether or not they decided to use what we have or not, it's like I can actually see how they're thinking about it, and it's so much better than like the rest of what I see, which is like, oh no, we decided to hack this together, or we're not tracking what we're doing or auditing it in any way. It's I hate to say YOLOing it out there because they can. It's not the most critically important thing for them as they see it, even though we know longer term. Tracking the models that are being used and how you're fine tuning it, like actually being able to trace it back. It's like going out there and, as Will loves to say, right to production, using VI to edit those production files. It's great in the moment, but you got to trace that back to the Git commit if you care about your production reliability.
I mean, we actually encountered a case where the model that was deployed was forgotten completely, and it drifted, but it was still part of the application flow. So it was still producing data to the application, and the application was putting that into databases essentially. So it was, at the end, it wasn't something critical that they were doing, but it took them, like, they couldn't understand at first, like. That's what they told us, essentially, is they couldn't understand at first how that happened. And they weren't even aware that there was a model there at that point. That was generating the data that they are seeing. And it was drifting. I mean, it was doing a simple categorization, but then it drifted so much that it was always putting things into irrelevant categories that it wasn't supposed to put into. So, and that's what happens with AI. That's why you need to be really careful with the pipeline. Like the VI example that you have given, it's like you can get away with editing something with VI in production.
You heard it here. It's official.
if something is, if that deployment changes 15 in one time in 15 years.
Yeah.
Right. So, but if you have a deployment that changes only once in 15 years, you may get away with that because your input and output never changes, right? It's like that thing is, if it is working, it is working, unless you have a bug. And software never has bugs. So, but then with AI, it is going to change. It's whether that happens in 6 months, that happens in a year, you need to monitor that. You need to have a pipeline that will retrain and get rid of the drift and so on and so forth and all that. So I think that's where the main differences starts to happen between DevOps and maybe MLOps.
That's a really good point, actually. I think you worded that really well. You are only going to use ML in situations that are already so complex or change so frequently to get the value out that you have to imagine that you built such a complex, like pretend you didn't use ML. Think about how complex of a system you would have had in its place. There must have been so much testing around that, so much reliability, so much concern and fine tuning of that to get it right. You can't just throw away all those extra pieces because you're using some sort of model now. You still need all of them in place. Otherwise, just think about that legacy system that's 30 years old and has maybe 100 million lines of code. Like that's just absolutely ridiculous to be running as a critical piece of software.
Right. I mean, there are problems like, well, for instance, again, this is a real one. Let's say that you're producing shirts.
Yeah.
And you're distributing these shirts to all over the world. How do you know what sizes to produce and where to distribute them? Someone needs to make that decision. You cannot send the same amount of large to every country, and you cannot send the same amount of XX large to every country.
There was actually, I think there was a good paper that was released. I think it was the U.S. Army, where they were trying to devise standard kits for sizes, and they performed a number of physical measurements of everyone drafted. to decide, okay, we're going to have a small, medium, and large kit. How big should those things be? And after measuring and calculating the norms, they realized that there was not one person in the set of like 1,000 people that were able to fit into a standard distribution of one of those kits. They were like, it was like, and it's really ridiculous, and a good reminder that there is no such thing as following the norm and getting it actually right. And so there's no reason to believe that it would work in the AI world either.
Yeah, but on the other hand, given enough data, you can actually predict, how many larges that you need in China, and how many larges you need in US, and how many large you need in Canada, because you have the historical data as well as other demographics and so on and so forth. So when you combine all of that, and this is actually used somewhere, when you combine all of that, you can actually come up with a data say that, oh, you know what, I need this many exacells in Belgium, right? And that is very important, because sending the wrong shirt sizes halfway around the world where you won't be able to sell is a lot of cost.
I worked for a long time in manufacturing and manufacturing logistics, so I am well aware of some of the challenges there. So I appreciate the example. We're getting pretty up on time here, so I'm actually wondering if it may be the moment that we switch to doing some picks.
Oh, let's do some picks.
That's exciting.
Yeah, let's do it. So Warren, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I always go first. I think that's the secret format here.
Feel free to call me out, and I'll go first at any point.
No, I think I go first. I think that's the that's the rule here. All our listeners will know that by now. So my pick, I sort of alluded to this earlier about psychological safety on teams. There's actually a paper that was released by Google in 2016 about trying to figure out what makes a great team. And the actual article is released on the New York Times, 2016, what Google learned from its quest to build the perfect team. And I feel like in 2024, this shouldn't be a shocker anymore, but it's psychological safety. And it's sort of ridiculous how important that is really outlined in the paper. And that I still talk with companies today, my colleagues at other companies or ones that I consult for, and it's not their priority. And it's like, you look at data like this and the only conclusion you come to is it's the number one thing that everyone should be doing, because it's the guaranteed way of making the most successful company with the most revenue, the happiest customers, and the best employees. And yet people still aren't doing it.
Fair enough. All right, Gorkem, what'd you bring for a pick today?
So it was a little bit last minute, so I'm gonna pitch a coffee machine.
I'm super interested. You have my full attention.
Okay, so a little bit of background. There is something called a golden ratio in the coffee world. If you're doing drip coffee, right, there is something called golden ratio, which is the amount of time that your beans are going to spend with the boiled water. And there is an institution, I can't remember what, that measures these drip coffee machines and issues the golden ratio certificate. So this my first introduction to this machine actually goes all the way back to Nokia, where we had these kitchens in every floor in Nokia, and there was in every kitchen there was one or two coffee machine which you would go and make your own coffee, and it was so ridiculous that the coffee would run out, and then someone would have to make a new pitch. And one thing that we have done is we actually put cameras on top of them so that we would know if there is coffee in there or not before we leave our spot. So all of these machines in Nokia buildings were Mokka Masters, And the thing about Mocha Masters is they are the simplest machines that you can think of. Like all their parts, you can just take them apart and then put them in. Probably the most expensive piece in it is the copper wire, which boils the water, and that's actually the secret of it, because it boils the water into the correct degree at the correct time, and let the water go through the beans, for your coffee, with the correct ratio, and therefore it's considered one of the better coffee drip machines that you can get, and they are expensive. Kudos to Nokia.
Right. And on that note, I just learned last week that the webcam was invented, and I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was at Nokia. The webcam was invented because the engineers were tired of going to the break room, finding the coffee machine empty. So they figured out how to hook a camera up to their network and invented the first webcam.
Well, by the time I was there, it was invented, but I don't know if it was Nokia, but it was a very common practice in Nokia.
Yeah, rightly so. Rightly so. All right. So my pick is a little bit related to what we've been talking about today, just with the early stages of AI, ML, and how do we make this production ready? And so what my pick is actually Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, the spacecraft that are outside of our solar system now. And the reason I picked those is because just go and watch some YouTube videos about this, or read articles, whatever your preferred format is. The level of engineering done on these things is so amazing. The data storage on these things is an 8-track tape drive that's still working 47 years later. And it's gone so much further. Both of them have gone so much further than what they were ever planned to do. But when the engineers were designing it, they kind of hoped that this would be the scenario. And so they built for this. And here we are utilizing it today. And crazy things like the backups that they have on there, the primary thrusters worked for a long time. And then rightly so, they failed. And so after 37 years of sitting dormant, they fired up the backup thrusters and they worked flawlessly. And so just the level of engineering in the Voyager spacecraft, I think is worth spending a little bit of time to just acknowledge and admire, and then reflect on how that same engineering philosophy can be applied to your common everyday tasks. So Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 are my picks for the week.
You gotta upstage everyone there, huh, Will?
No, it was on my YouTube feed last night. It wasn't planned at all, but after watching it, I was like, wow, this relates to what I do on so many levels.
There's an inspirational YouTube video sitting out there that we should get in the link section of this episode.
I'll pull my YouTube history and get the link and make sure it gets into the show notes.
Sounds good.
Yeah, because it was a cool video. Super cool. I know it's only like 20 minutes. It's not one of those 2-hour ones. And on that note, Gorkem, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a cool conversation.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I'm looking
Likewise.
forward
Thank
to
you for
see how
having me.
this comes out. And be sure to keep in touch. Let us know what kind of things you're on, and when you come across something cool, I'd love to have you back on to talk about it and figure out how it works.
Yeah.
Awesome. And to all the listeners, thank you so much for listening. Be sure and reach out to us if you have questions, comments, episode ideas, or someone that you want us to have on the show. We'd love your input. Warren, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, as always.
All right. And we'll see y'all next week.